All right, welcome to Module 1.3. We are going to talk about the equipment that we need as well as some optional equipment that we do recommend. We're not going to give you a lot of recommendations outside of the scope of what you need and what we feel everyone should eventually have, okay? We're not going to recommend you the stuff that you use in Hollywood, so to speak. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about number one, the equipment that you must have. Then we're going to make you some optional recommendations, and then we're going to show you the equipment that we've used in our past from a cheap and free standpoint, from a mid-level standpoint, and then of course the high-end standpoint. So let's hop right into it. Now, the equipment that you need, that you must have, pretty self-explanatory: an HD camera and then video editing software, right? Now, some optional equipment that we recommend is a wireless lavalier mic system and then backdrop and lighting. And we'll get into this in a little bit. But first, let's start with the cheap level of, when we say cheap, for most of us, for a lot of us anyway, this is going to be more or less free. Because if you have an iPhone or a smartphone of sorts that has a decent camera on it, that's how we started. We started using the iPhone, and a lot of our first videos were shot with iPhones. Rocky's first one of his videos has, I believe, near 300,000 views, and it's a massive like to dislike ratio on YouTube. And he shot that just having someone hold his iPhone up, his very first video. So iPhones work. Of course, there's better options out there, but if you're starting out and you have an iPhone, that is perfectly fine. As for video editing software, typically if you're rocking a Mac or Windows, you've got some sort of software on your computer pre-installed, whether it be iMovie for Mac or Movie Maker for Windows. That's what we started out with. We started out for a couple years on iMovie on the Mac. And you know what? For the videos that we even shoot today, iMovie or Movie Maker could handle about 90% of the videos we shoot today. Saying that, we do a few videos that we require some higher end editing, some different transitions, some lighting adjustments, and stuff that iMovie and Movie Maker just does not quite have the power and capability to pull off where the higher end software could do so. Now, mid-grade recommendations. Let's start with Canon. We personally have owned both of these cameras and love them. We've also owned cameras that we hated, but we do recommend both of these: the Canon Vixia HFR100, and then the Sony Handycam CX110. Now, if I had to choose one out of these two, personally, I'd probably go with the Handycam. No real reason quality wise. I just thought, me personally, I like the screen better. I like the touch screen a little more. I thought it was a little bit more reactive. And I mean, outside of that, you can't really go wrong with either one of these. And then they're priced around that $300 to $500 range. So they're not, of course, not cheap, but they're not extremely nuts expensive either. As for software, now here's where we kind of up on the software in that mid grade. Now, when I say mid grade with Sony Vegas, this is probably more high grade from a pricing standpoint. But honestly, from a quality standpoint, I kind of still put it in that mid grade. And the reason I say that is I personally use Final Cut 10, $299.99 for my Mac, and I love it. I've never had a better software personally. I've used about everything out there, and this Final Cut 10 has been the best for me and my business personally. And now, saying that, we have clients who use Sony Vegas who absolutely love it, would not switch to Final Cut 10 if we tried to force them to. They wouldn't do it. They love their Sony Vegas for whatever reason. But for me, I enjoy only paying about 50% of what they pay. So, I'm going to stick to my Final Cut 10. And the cool thing about both of these is you do not need a crazy amount of education and computer savviness to get started on these programs. Because trust me, I'm horrible with editing, but with the way that we do our videos, you don't need some crazy transitional editing or anything like that. And anything that I've personally found, anything that I didn't know, I could just go to YouTube and search Final Cut 10, how to slow down my frame, or how to speed up video, or how to change, you could do anything. So, the YouTube's going to have a bunch of different tutorials for you on what exactly you're trying to accomplish. Lighting and backdrop from that mid grade. Now, notice we didn't have this at the lower grade, and the reason being is it's not necessary, it's just optional. But we do recommend it. We have this exact setup downstairs in my office, the Cowboy Studio set. Does great for us. Everyone comments and says it looks phenomenal. The material is great. The lights are great. $237.76 on Amazon. You can just search for Cowboy Studio Set, lighting and backdrop, and you'll find this. It's a great setup, and I really do recommend this. All right, moving on to high grade. Now here's a camera that we've recently have purchased and we love it. The Sony HDR PJ790V high definition Handycam. And notice that it's still small, but it's still very high quality, and it looks good, of course, but it's still small. I think a lot of people make that mistake of, when they want a high-end camera, they try to get one of those big shoulder mount bulky things. And I'll tell you right now, that is just going to cause headaches, especially because you want, for the majority of us anyway, we want a tripod-based camera. And then if you get a large camera, then you're investing into a larger tripod, and it's just going to, more or less start a snowball effect of money being spent. Where this little Sony HDR PJ790B has just been phenomenal for us. We love it. The quality for this little thing is just as good as any camera that we've seen, and any camera that we've ever been recommended for our business. And keep in mind, in our business, we do both video of face videos, like sales page videos, where it's just me talking to the camera. And we do a lot of action video, a lot of basketball specific stuff, jumping specific stuff, a lot of camera movement. And this camera right here covers everything phenomenally well. As for software, notice that Sony Vegas and Final Cut are still in the mix at the high grade. The reason being is I can't recommend anything really better than Final Cut 10. I love it. As for Sony Vegas, I've stuck it here just because, I've got some people who are making multiple six figures who refuse to move away from Sony Vegas because they think it's the best and they love it. So, out of fairness to their success, I wanted to include Sony Vegas in there. But another choice we'd like to stick in here is Adobe Premiere. Now, Adobe's known as that high level, that really high level quality type stuff. And there's going to be a learning curve to Adobe Premiere, as there is with Final Cut or Sony Vegas, but I believe the Adobe Premiere learning curve is a little bigger. But again, you can go to YouTube and get just as many tutorials for Adobe Premiere as you can for Final Cut or Sony Vegas. Now, saying that, the price is what I really like about Adobe Premiere now. If you remember Adobe back in the day, if you've been kind of around this video editing stuff or just Adobe software like Photoshop, etc., you remember and recall that the pricing were typically really high. Well, now that Adobe has moved to this monthly payment structure, and it's really cool because now, you get a high level $1,000 piece of software from back in the day, or at least $600 to $1,000 piece of software for $29 a month. So it's a really good deal, and you could have Adobe Premiere for 10 months before you even reach the price of Final Cut. So you could make a ton of videos in that time frame. So those are just some recommendations for you. And then audio. Now here's the reason why we haven't brought in a lav mic in the prior mid-grade or cheap level is, number one, from a cheap level standpoint, I don't think it's necessary. From a mid-grade standpoint, I think it's a little expensive at the $629.95 price point. Saying that, we've had lav mics in the past that were around that $100 to $200 range that worked well, but I couldn't remember which one it worked well for us, and we've actually purchased about 3 or 4 different ones, and the rest sucked. So I didn't want to recommend you the wrong one, and I think that you could look out there in that mid-level range and find a decent lav mic for that $100 and $200 price point. But this Sennheiser EW112P G3 B band 626 668 megahertz. I probably didn't have to say all that, but it's phenomenal. It changed the game for our business. The beauty of a mic like this is the quality, and not only the quality of how it sounds and how crisp it sounds when you talk, but also how it cuts out all the crap going on around you. In our business, balls, we're in a public gym. We have balls bouncing, kids screaming, music playing, and this lav mic just cuts all that out, and it just sounds like you could hear a pin drop, and it's just our voice. It's so good. $629, it's a hell of an investment for audio. I do understand that, but if there was one thing that I'd recommend if you wanted to jump one level up from that mid grade to the high grade, is I wouldn't go for a camera first. I would actually go for this audio input right here, this Sennheiser EW Lav mic. I think you'll absolutely love it. And then as for lighting and backdrop, from that high-end standpoint, we have the Lowell DV Creator Kit 55. Never owned this. I'll be the first to admit it. This is just the one that I found that it looked like it had everything that I would want, as well as the reviews on it were phenomenal, and from it's a high-end setup. Now, saying that, my little cowboy studio, I think looks great. I think I get great feedback on it. This little LDV creator will probably just would blow it out of the water, I'm sure. But I'm not sure if it would be that beneficial for me personally, because I know my backdrop, it doesn't hurt my business whatsoever with my cowboy setup that was $200 over spending. I'm just not sure if I can justify spending 1440 quite yet. But saying that, if you know more about lighting and backdrop than I do, because my knowledge on this stuff isn't that high. I just know how to set it up and make it look okay. Um, if you invest in this and you love it, let me know, and who knows, maybe I will move up to this eventually. So that is it for equipment. I wanted to keep it short and sweet. Hopefully you have an idea of what you need, or maybe you already have it, and that way we can move right into the next module, and I'll see you over there.